Boylan from the Washington State Coalition. I am the program coordinator here, and what we're going to be doing today is we have a webinar that talks about technology and best practices, and this is one of the many webinars and trainings that I will be doing this year. So please keep checking your emails and information from WSCDA, because there's lots of trainings coming out, not just from me, but from other advocates here on staff. Other staff here will be doing trainings too, so please check our website. You'll be able to connect with lots of different trainings that we're putting on this year. So a lot of them are coming up really soon, so check it out. So let me see, anything else I want to talk about?
We're having a sound issue.
Okay, so some folks are having a hard time hearing. I'm going to try to speak as loud as I can. So I'm going to go ahead, I've got the technical person here, and I'm going to see if we can fix this so folks can hear me. So hold on for one moment. So Becca is here working on the sound, so please just in there for just a few more minutes. I know it's hard to hear me, so we're just going to figure out plan B so folks can hear what I'm saying. So hang in there for just a few more minutes.
Okay, doing a sound check here. How is that? Is the volume better for you guys? Can you just type in the chat box and let me know if you can hear? Okay, that sounds better. Thanks. Yes, I can hear. Great. Okay, we solved that little problem.
Great. I'm glad you guys can hear us now. So we'll get rolling. I wanted to introduce our guest, who is pretty much going to do the whole webinar for us. And her name is June Lovell. I know many of you know her. She has been with the DV movement for many years now, probably over 25 years. June and I have worked together for probably about 25 years. And we just enjoy bringing more material and information to you guys, so that, you know, the more you learn, the better we are. So June is going to, she's also volunteering here at the Coalition. She's been here for about 2 years volunteering, and she was also a member of the Washington State Coalition Board. So we're just she's gonna talk a little bit about this best practices, and we're gonna move into the conversation. So welcome, June. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started.
Well, great. Hi, you guys. We see the chat coming through that while Deirdre was talking, you couldn't really hear her. I'm the one wearing the headset with the microphone, so I think while I'm talking, you're going to be able to hear. I apologize for these technical glitches. Kind of ironic since we're talking about tech, but you know, we're doing our best. Anyway, so again, the topic of today's webinar is your agency's use of technology and best practices. And I know several of you, but, well, maybe not personally. Okay, I'm trying to advance this slide and it's not going anywhere. Uh,
Just because
you guys, if you could see Deidre and I in this, we're actually not in Deidre's office, we're in Becca's office, and everything's just kind of freezing up on us here. So we all have to keep our good humor as we try to move through this. I'm trying to move to the next slide and the whole system is bogged down. Oh boy. Okay, so let me just tell you a little bit about me for a second until this comes back up. As Deidre mentioned, I've been involved in the domestic violence movement here in Washington State for a long time. And back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I started doing a lot of trainings around the state and the country on high-tech stalking, and specifically working with victims of domestic violence who were being stalked by their partners, and safety planning and threat assessment and everything around that. And I just developed a great passion for it, and I was just given a lot of opportunity to learn about it and also speak about it. So from that, this career has grown. I've done a lot of other things around that, but I used to work at New Beginnings for a long, long time, New Beginnings in Seattle, and I was a community advocate for a long time, and then the program manager. And then I moved on to the YWCA and worked there as the regional director for South King County, and there was a domestic violence program within that region, and it's kind of shifted around now, and there's a larger domestic violence program at the YWCA now, and so that's the connection. I've always stayed connected through domestic violence, even though some of my focus shifted towards housing and towards employment, but I've always had my toe in domestic violence. And then I retired a couple of years ago, and since then have been volunteering at the coalition here, and it's just been incredibly fulfilling. Again, I've been able to stay connected to the DV world, and I just enjoyed my time working on the board here so much that I really wanted to stay connected. So for those of you that know me, I'm the one on the left, and that's Deidre Boyland on the right, and we go way, way back. We used to work at New Beginnings together. So that's for those of you who don't know us, that's us. Couple of names to, or rather, a couple of faces to the names. So why are we offering this webinar? Many agencies are moving towards mobile advocacy. Some have great experience doing this and have learned along the way. And it's been bumpy. I mean, this is a huge leap back from the days in the 80s when, there were only shelters, right? 70s and 80s when there were only DV shelters. And the thought of a community program or even doing any sort of outward-facing advocacy in the community was a huge safety concern was our thought. But, as things go, we realize there are more ways to be able to do this great work. And that most agencies want to be up to date with their use of technology, with safety being paramount. So I think a lot of this work is done with safety being the number one component as we move forward. So what we're going to do here is cover important aspects of that technology, and, and somewhat in great detail. And also I will be pointing you many times to the National Network to End Domestic Violence website. This is their curriculum. They have best practices throughout. So when Deirdre asks for questions, which I have incorporated in here, many of these best practices are already written up in wonderful form. You can just print them out. So, um, it's been done, and for those of you that wanted best practices, it's there. You'll be able to find it at nnedv.org. I just want to pause for 1 second here and have folks from AdWaz. Is AdWaz on the line? We had about 10 people from AdWaz register. And I'm just curious if you are online and do you have an interpreter there at at your site. This is being recorded and it will be transcribed, but I'm just curious because we had such a large registration from AdWise if you are online right now. So just let us know in the chat box. Okay, so the chat box. So the way this webinar is set up is through bullet points. So the bullet points are set up like questions and they are not meant for you to literally chat and answer each question. This is about an agency readiness kind of overview, things for you to think about, and we will be covering them not in terms of Q&A. But I did incorporate some of the questions that you did submit prior. I tried to group them together because there were many common themes. So you'll see that with the big Q, and then we'll talk about the answers. And we will have time at the end of this for you to ask questions. And so why don't you just keep notes as we go along. If there's something that you really, really want to pipe in, that's fine. I'd love this to be interactive. So post your comment or question in the chat box, and we've got Deidre monitoring that chat box, so we will get to you. But if it's something you want to just hold tight till the end, that's fine too. Let's see. Okay, is everybody doing okay? It looks like everybody can hear us finally. I have not heard from AdWise yet. Okay, that's fine. Okay, we're going to start with phones. Phones, super basic, right? This is how most DV agencies started, right? We knew how to work a hotline. We had phones plugged into the wall. This was before we even had mobile phones. Not cell phones, but cordless phones. I remember when cordless phones first came on the scene, it was like this big question of, oh my gosh, if the advocate has to go to the bathroom, does she have to bring the phone into the bathroom with her? You know, like those were our biggest problems back in the day. But I feel pretty confident that most agencies know how to safely use their phones for their hotline, for their phone calls. So we're just going to briefly cover this. Caller ID, um, again, I'm pretty confident all DV agencies are already doing this and know about caller ID and know how to block and unblock phone calls. The next level that I guess I'm wondering is, you know, does your agency have a policy to purge and not collect caller ID information from callers? And that's a question to ask yourself, and just you know, highlight that in terms of, sure, you're using caller ID, you're blocking and unblocking calls, but what are you doing with that information? And what are you doing with your phone bills, right? Does your agency have a policy to delete the bills and other online documentation that contains personally identifying information about survivors? Now, if you, you know, take a look at your phone bill, of course, what you see is just a big old string of numbers. I don't consider that personally identifying information. And I think if you've got somebody that can hack into your system, I seriously doubt they're going to go through and call every single one of those numbers. But it's just a heads up. And agency phone bills are huge. They're packets, right? They're huge, but it's just something to take a look at, and you know, just a heads up.
And also, I think it's important that I know most agencies do collect information when callers call in, but to consider what you're collecting. Like, is it just too much information that's unnecessary, or is it just the things that, you know, are important to you, like zip code or area code or first name?
Yeah.
You know, so what are the basic things that you're asking folks when they're calling into your program? So that's
Okay.
something to think about.
And also the other thing just to highlight is a phone call really is your most secure way to connect with clients when you think about it, right? What you're saying between you and the caller is private pretty much. There's no documentation about, you know, it's not a text, it's not an email. So a lot of times when people want to have a really private conversation, they will just pick up the phone. And we're going to get into this in a little bit, but it's a generational thing too, right? Older people, you know, like myself, you know, we just want to get you on the horn. We want to call you up. We want to connect. Younger people, millennials, mills, you know, they want that instant message, that text, that immediate connection. And safety not being at the top of their mind, but folks that are really in crisis and just want to connect, they're going to connect with you the way they're most comfortable. So I just think using phones is an incredibly secure way to connect with survivors. Um, but we just also have to recognize that not all survivors, that's the way they want to do it. So voicemails. I think this is an important part of training advocates, particularly hotline staff, um, around safety planning, and that is, does your staff know how to leave a message on somebody's phone who calls your hotline or calls your agency for services, right? And I know that there are ways to leave an outgoing message on an agency phone that really explicitly says, please let us know if this is a safe number to call you back, and let us know if we can leave a name or a number. And even if actually leaving a name is probably not a good idea, but just your outgoing message should be as clear and direct and instructive as it can be, just so someone who we're leaving a message for knows what to expect. Also, lay out your expectation on when they can expect a return phone call. If you know that you're not in a position to return a call within 24 to 48 hours, you need to let them know when to expect a return call, right? Keep in mind, they're in crisis probably when they're calling you, and they want to know when they're going to hear back. So um, again, training for your advocates on how to return the call in a safe way, and does your agency's voicemail get forwarded to email or text message? Now, I know if somebody leaves a voicemail on my cell phone, I see it in text form as well. So that's just an important piece of technology for you to be aware of with your devices. Um, how are we doing? We okay? Everybody's real quiet right now. Okay, I'm going to move forward. So crisis line hotline again. This is where we oh good. Thank you for your feedback. I see that coming through. Crisis line again. This is where we all began. This is literally the beginning of, I think, DV services, was running a hotline, running a shelter. And so it goes back to, do you keep a log? And I'm going to take a wild guess here and say yes. I mean, most agencies I know keep detailed logs of callers. So the question to ask is, what are you logging and why? And I think a lot of I know a lot of agencies are writing down or entering into their computers really detailed information about the call. And you need to ask yourself why you're doing that. I truly believe it's a need to know versus want to know situation. You want to know everything. You really do, right? You want to know what time they called, what's going on, how many kids they have, what the situation is, when literally what you're ascertaining, what you are troubleshooting right off the bat is what? Right? Are you safe? That's the first thing any crisis call asks is, are you safe? And your entire conversation moves from there. So need to know versus want to know. The need to know is typically what's in your contract, right? What do you need to report? How many calls you receive on a certain day, typically what zip code. I remember that demographic being huge, is what zip code is that call coming in, and it's also good to know the time of day or night that call came in because it helps you with staffing to know, when the peaks and valleys are. So get to know your contract reporting requirements and record just that, document just that. And the example, which is an old one and a tragic one, but is Nicole Brown Simpson used a crisis line. She called the Santa Monica DV program a couple of times. And they took down a ton of information, including her first and last. They knew who she was because that call log from that Santa Monica DV program, that crisis line, was subpoenaed during the trial. And it gave up quite a bit of information. I mean, they knew it was her that was calling, and they knew the situation because they logged in detail why she was calling. And this could either be a really great thing in terms of that's what they're looking for. It could be a really horrible thing in terms of privacy and confidentiality. So this is just something to think about. Your call logs can be subpoenaed. We've seen these call logs get subpoenaed in the OJ case, and that's just one. That's just a big celebrity case, but I mean, when I think of the um, most of the cases that we are familiar with, it's not going to get the play that that did. But I will never forget that, and I was pretty shocked when I realized that a hotline log was getting subpoenaed for trial. Any questions here? Any questions here about call lines, hotlines? Because this is literally um, the jumping off point. Okay. Okay, we're just kind of monitoring the chat here to see if anybody has any follow-up on this. Okay, so one of the first questions we had that was about this is, we have women who only access us via the crisis line. How do we safety plan with them? And, the answer seemed really obvious to me, which was, do the best you can with what you've got. And a lot of times, um, callers, this is their only way to access, or it's the very first way to access. So you just make the best of the short time you have with them on the phone. Again, assessing safety right off the bat, um, and incorporating tech into the safety plan. I just think it's a little too old-fashioned to not talk about cell phones and Facebook and all these social media platforms. I mean, part of assessing is finding out who has access to her computer. Does the abuser have access to the computer? Does the abuser have access to passwords? All that kind of stuff. I think as you're doing your agency's evaluation about safety planning and crisis calls and such, including tech in that safety plan is going to be critical. So when you have women who are only calling and accessing via crisis line, just maximizing that crisis line time to incorporate all things that could really affect her down the road. We have one question that says, I'm sorry I hopped on a little bit late. Yes, yeah, well the slides are not going to be sent out, but they're going to be posted online. Plus this webinar is being recorded, so that will be posted in its entirety as well. Okay, let's talk about cell phones. We've all got cell phones. So, and I'm going to spend some time talking about this. I have some strong opinions about this one. So, are your cell phones owned by the agency? And this is across the board, yes and no. I've seen the full gamut of people using their personal cell phones, people carrying 2, 3 cell phones, or only using agency cell phones. A lot of agencies will reimburse you. If you're using your cell phone, I know where I used to work, you had an option to get reimbursed a little bit for your phone. I think it was $25 a month if you're using your personal phone, or they will provide you with an agency cell phone with a data plan. So you could use that. And I just think for advocates that are doing direct service, using an agency-owned cell phone is the best way to go. It seems the safest to me in terms of your staff's personal information not being compromised. And again, if your staff is using their personal device, are they aware of the potential privacy and security risks? And are there policies around privacy on personal devices? And I've talked to several people across the state where some agencies do a fantastic job with this, and others it's up to the advocate, who is doing the direct service to take this upon themselves. And I do know that there are some advocates working out there today that do not have not gone into their privacy settings at all, and they are not setting up and blocking their location or doing things that they could to block private information going out. If calling survivors from a personal device is the caller ID blocking used to increase the advocate's privacy, again, it seems like it is a basic thing, but for some reason when it comes to cell phones, not everybody seems to be using the privacy settings on these things as they do with their other devices. And of course, clearing out contacts on any cell phone that an advocate is using. And I just want to pause right here for a second. Can you guys weigh in? How do you think you're doing around cell phones and advocates using personal phones and clearing out data and information? Because I know most agencies, everybody's got a cell phone. So think about that. Please, yeah. Let me know how you're doing around cell phones. And I'm going to move on to the next slide, which is another cell phone slide, but I want to hear what's going on. Okay. Hang on, I can. Okay, so one agency says there are no personal cell phones being used. It's the one that the agency provides, and a question is the decision about whether to issue an agency cell phone up to the agency itself. Are there grants that can allow the agency to issue cell phones to their advocates? Not any grants that I know of, but I believe that's part of infrastructure and priority. Somebody says they can't see the chat screen. The chat screen should be what's on this one. It's up on the right-hand side. Yeah, and you're not going to see the entire chat. You're just able to type in your question, and we see the chat. So I hope that makes sense. Somebody from a small community says because the community is small, people who are reaching out to them are people they know and have their numbers anyway. Exactly. Providing services in rural areas is a much different thing. I realize that. And it's still a safety issue, but I just really want to give a nod to those that are in smaller communities and how it's different for them. And another agency says, staff do not regularly use personal devices for client services, and if so, they always dial the *67. No client contacts are saved in our rotating hotline cell phone. So there's a great example of an agency doing a very good job around protecting privacy. Um, do advocates delete call logs, messages, and voicemails to ensure there isn't a record of callers on cell phones? I'm seeing yes, they do. And is there a passcode lock on the cell phone in case it's lost or stolen? Yes. And are you able to remotely wipe or disable a phone in case it is lost or stolen? So again, this is just like on your iPhone, if you have an iPhone or something similar, how you can hit Find My Phone if you lose your phone, and you can also disable that phone, and you can also use it to have an alarm go off if you have lost your phone. And that would be a wise tip to do on your agency phone as well. And again, looking at, is there security and antivirus or anti-malware on the phone? We've got great stuff coming in on chat. Let me just take a hot second here to look it up. We often have conversations about the best use of personal numbers. My agency does not allow us to use cell phones. Okay. We do erase information on the rotating hotline cell phone as soon as pertinent information is documented in our client database. The number of calls in one day, not the client number. Okay, got it. Great. Thank you. Great comments. Yeah, yeah. So we're going to talk about this in a bit in more detail, but we are going to talk about mobile advocacy, safety and security around that. So kind of queue up your questions in your head around that, because right now we're going to move on to um, online communication. And this is where I have seen a huge insurgence of advocacy, just shifting more toward, hi, do you have an appointment today? You're seeing folks one-on-one in your office, or obviously in your shelter if you're providing shelter services, but community-based programs and the like it's not so much having the client come to your office and sitting down for a one-on-one in your little office, or you meeting at it is you meeting at the Starbucks. It is you going to their place of work and finding a private place to talk. So, online communication is huge. This is where a lot of questions come up around, how to do this safely. This is, again, I referred to millennials. This is where the younger clients that we serve, this is their life. This is how they live. It's fast. It may not be the safest way to do it, but there've got to be ways to adapt how we provide these services. So boundaries and your team. We always talk about boundaries when we're talking about DV work. And this is my slide. This is not of NNEDV, but I believe advocates should have clear direction about when to turn off their work phone and not respond to voicemails or texts. Now, I would really like you to use your chat box. And my question is this incorporated into safety planning? Do your clients know what to expect if they reach out after normal business hours, right? Because if someone has a cell phone and is texting with their boss or their coworkers, or there are questions that happen after hours, I understand there's a lot of communication after hours. I know it just happens. It's the way it is. It's the business, right? It's domestic violence. It does not happen between 9 and 5. In terms of client contact, though, if someone is providing mobile advocacy and you're receiving texts at 7 or 8 o'clock at night from a client, what is their expectation, and what is the expectation you have of your staff on how to respond to that text or not? So that is my question to you. Um, is this incorporated into safety planning? Basically, does the client know what to expect if they reach out after hours? And does your staff know that it's okay to shut it down? Let's see. All right. Okay, so what I'm seeing so far is folks are advising clients that they can use the hotline after hours, right? Like if it's a crisis, if they need to check in with someone, they can call the hotline. Does that ring true for you guys? Just patiently wait. I just think this causes a lot of drama within agencies. And if you've got one advocate that is responding all the time, the other ones might feel guilty because they are, at their kid's soccer game or whatever and not in a position. Um, Okay, so our agency has a crisis line. Each advocate takes a turn and carries the crisis phone. And okay, so you do have a crisis. It looks like you guys are utilizing crisis lines for after hours. You have a backup system, so there's a manager available to assist if needed. Great. So I'm seeing a real trend here of no one answering calls or emails after hours within the agency. Everything is being funneled through the crisis line. Excellent. A lot of you have supervisors as backup on that crisis line for staff. Okay, great. And again, so this slide is basically just to, have you just kind of assess, if you've got staff that are working off hours and not being paid, which one, not good, two, unhealthy, right? Like they need to be able to shut it down. This is where you see a lot of burnout. This is where you see a lot of people just, regardless of their personal situation, whether they have a very active personal life or whether they don't, the expectation should be the same for everybody across the board once you are, in quotes, off hours. So now let's see if there's a question. No, I mean the state hotline is the state hotline. It's 24 hours. So yeah. So, and then here's my humble, unsolicited opinion for what it's worth. I truly believe, if anyone providing direct services is feeling vulnerable or uncomfortable using their cell phones for work, that it is the agency's responsibility to make it a priority to invest in agency-issued cell phones. And I think this is one of those line items that needs to show up in your budget. Infrastructure around technology must be a priority. Otherwise, you're really falling behind. And I also think it's one of those things that should be across the board, not a choice. So anyone choosing not to use a work phone feels weird about it. And when I say weird about it, I mean if somebody's given a choice, I don't want them to feel like, oh, if I opt out and say, well, my coworker is using her personal cell phone, so I don't want that advocate to feel like they're not strong or they're weak or they're high strung or anxious or paranoid. If you make it just a matter of fact, all agency business is conducted on the agency issued cell phone. That's the normal. That's the way it is. There's no choice. Because if there's a choice, you're always going to have somebody making a choice to use their personal phone because they don't want to carry around two phones. That's what it was in my experience. And I think that there was a lot of, I don't know, I just think personal, angst about it because the advocates wanted to feel like they, they weren't being wimpy or whatever. So again, agency issued cell phones in particular for people doing direct service, I highly, highly recommend. If you are a supervisor or a manager or a director and you are not doing direct service, different story. I think there's a little more leeway on that. But for direct service staff, I think having not using their personal phones is something I highly recommend. Let's see. Uh, I'm just reading a chat that they advise survivors to call the hotline, and we never give out our agency's cell phone number for boundary issues. Staff takes turns on the hotline. Wonderful ED who always is our backup. That's wonderful. Okay, excellent. So text messaging, right? We sure do this a lot. So incorporating text messaging into staff, onboarding new staff, training them, you're not just handing them a phone and telling them good luck, right? Especially if you're doing mobile advocacy. The DV program that was at the YWCA, the DV director there relied heavily on text messaging. And it worked. It just worked. I was a little hesitant, I think maybe because I was a little old school, but it was a younger crew, and I saw it play out beautifully. They were all very smart about it, and this was texting again with each other, a supervisor staying in close contact with the staff via text, and also some of the staff texting with clients. And so important here is having a written policy for text messaging clients and having it outline, how to use it, and as well as protocols, and helping them safety plan on how clients could use it, increasing their privacy. And again, these next bullet points are around, are they deleting their text message logs regularly? Are they talking to survivors about risks, about having entire conversations of their history on their phones? And again, one thing you can do is, on your own personal phone, is to go in and delete past text messages, especially if you've got long text threads with people that you text with typically daily. You will be amazed at how much space frees up on your phone, for one, which is awesome. But also, it's just good practice to just keep that cleared out, because, what are you keeping the historical, um, you know, the historical conversation for? You really are not going to be scrolling through 55 screens of text to find that one thing. You're just going to retext. And talking about caller ID on phones, you can't conceal the agency's phone number if, once you unblock caller ID. So keep that in mind. And again, back to the boundary issue of, what's the agency's expectation about advocates responding to text messages after hours? And are the people that you serve clearly informed about the alternative way to connect? And what I'm seeing overwhelmingly in the chat is folks are doing a fantastic job about pointing people toward their 24-hour crisis line. And then we've got a question here about an agency not moving into text yet and interested how to do this safely. And again, on the nnedv.org website, there are great best practices around this type of thing, around text messaging and how to start it up. And again, I'm gonna point you to that site directly by the end of this, so you'll see exactly what it looks like. But these best practices are already written. That's why we decided we are not going to reinvent the wheel. These folks know how to do this and been doing it for years, and it's clearly written, and it's geared toward you, the DV provider. So it's great stuff. And I talked to a couple folks yesterday because I wanted to just check in, are you using text message? And several were not. So, I get it. It's a big leap, but it's something worth considering, especially because for a lot of people that we serve, it's just a really quick way to check in, see what's going on, see what they need, if everything's all right, that type of thing. Yeah. Okay, so we have clients who can only safely contact us via text. We can't do this, and this is a barrier. What can we do? And again, my initial response to this, okay, find another way. But you're going to have to find another way, literally. But if they have a cell phone and they are online, they clearly have access to the internet. And so the suggestion here is to set up a brand new email, and through Yahoo or through Gmail, just an email with a very not obvious email address, like not their first and last name. A really tricky email address that's all they use it for is to connect with you, and that history is wiped out as soon as they're done. And I want to give Susie Foti credit for this. She's out of Colville, but she has done some great safety planning with her staff, in that if they receive an email, I'm jumping ahead to email here, but if they receive an email from someone, they do not reply. They do not hit reply and reply to that email. They start a fresh email. So that is a great tip. It's a smart tip, right? So emailing, if you do not have access to texting with clients, emailing is a great alternative. Um, and again, keep in mind, younger folks think old people email, right? They're not like they're emailing with their parents, but they're not really emailing in terms of their day-to-day life unless they're working, and then they're using work email. But hopefully around this, they're not using a work email. So instruct them to set up a brand new email. It's free, and you can communicate that way, especially if they know that you respond quickly, like within that day, if you're seeing the email during the day. Um, and here's a question. It says, how do we know that it's the survivor that is texting and receiving our text message? Well, the answer to that is you don't, right? You don't. And I know one way that people um, get over this barrier is they have a question. They have a question and an answer that only those two people will know. So you can do that in terms of, just like they do with, when you're setting up accounts, right? What was your pet's, I wouldn't make it something easier that an abuser could know. I would make it something, just work it out so it's something that, the only two of you. Does that make sense? Can I get a little feedback on this one? Okay, good idea. Thank you. Yeah. So if you're texting, you can do a quick check that they know it's you. This was a great question. How much can we text without breaking confidentiality? And my answer to this is whatever you would write down in a client file, right? Same thing. Of course, keep it brief, keep it vague. You should not be doing in-depth safety planning with highly sensitive information in a text. It just shouldn't happen. Get on the phone with that. Talk to them on the phone. If they are at work and they can only text you and can't get on the phone, or they don't have a break and they can't talk with you, I understand you need to text, but be very, very careful, right? Because I always approached this as, if this were to be subpoenaed, what would they know? Or if the abuser were to somehow get a hold of this phone and started reading stuff, how much information would they find out? So I think in this case, being super paranoid and being super vague is the only way to go. Yeah, just like you counsel advocates about written case notes, right? You are very, very vague. You're not saying anything that can be misconstrued or can be misinterpreted as you providing any sort of diagnosis or giving legal advice, all that kind of stuff that can get you into trouble. So nothing identifying. Imagine if the abuser got a hold of it. If you would be mortified at what that person would read, don't text it. And we also have a comment that said emails should also have a safe word if communicating via email to clarify it's not the abuser. And yes, I mean, you can take that extra step and do that, but that is you making sure you have to do a quick turnaround on that one, right? Like if you're not seeing the email for a couple hours and you're you could have some lag time in there, but it's a good idea. So, oh yeah, so Deirdre just said, what about teaching the clients about text messaging? Yes, like if this is a safe way for you to communicate with clients, spending that time, it's around safety planning. It's just another level of safety planning. And again, those best practices are online already around tech safety planning. This is more around agency readiness and stuff like that, but I love talking about stuff like this, so I'm not going to go off on a real tangent, but yeah, it is part of safety planning with the women around on how to text message. If they don't know how to, I mean, this just makes me laugh because I think back to when my daughter taught me to text message, and it was probably one of the greatest regrets of her life. You know, text messaging with your mom. Oh my God. But I got it, and now I text message all the time. But it takes a while when somebody's new at this. So I think teaching people how to text message is a great safety plan. Again, it's on their device. You got to make sure that device is safe, just like you got to make sure their email is safe. All that. Yeah, really. And teaching them how to delete, of course, right? Clear, 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 clear. So now we're going to move into email a bit. So your agency, okay, so you've got advocates that work in your agency and they probably get hundreds of emails every week. I think as part of their training them to delete survivors' emails from their inbox regularly, and especially not storing their addresses. And you know how when you type an email and it autofills, right? That's something we're trying to avoid here is if someone decided if something got real nasty and you at some point I mean I sound paranoid, but I would always operate as if the whole kit and caboodle was about to be subpoenaed and taken away and entered into court record. Right? So, and I know that's probably an unhealthy way to go, but I just never wanted to get too comfortable and think, oh, this is cool, I understand this and I feel confident that this person is, safely doing email or whatever. I always operated from a pretty paranoid starting point just to check myself that I never let it lapse. So in email, it's the same thing, deleting original emails, replying in a fresh email so there isn't a history of the conversation thread. I truly believe email safety is part of safety planning. And again, we're going to move into this a little more, but what happens to the agency's email, right? What system is it being backed up to? And by you deleting it right away, I think you lessen that chance greatly of it living on forever. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Are you all comfortable around how you handle agency email, your advocates emailing with survivors? Looking for a little feedback here. Little feedback. Yes, is a response. So are you doing a lot of emailing with survivors? Is this the way you're communicating? I mean, I think some of you are, but not all. And if not, I guess I am curious why not. If email is not part of your advocacy, is there a reason for that? And what is that? I'm just curious. So if you could just take a second, type that in. Okay. Yes. So another question we got, so this, I kind of combined that we had several iterations of this question, but there's a concern about clients' computer and email getting hacked. How do you keep things as safe as possible? And I talked about this a little bit ago, but creating a brand new email address that has nothing to do with her name, her kids' names, her pet names, her family name, anything like that. Just a really confusing email address that no one would ever guess, right? Like redlamp@gmail.com or, frappuccino strawberry at yahoo.com, just these really random email addresses, um, and making sure that they clear their history. If they're sharing a computer with the abuser, that they're clearing their history if that's a safe thing to do. If an abuser is tracking um, email use and all of a sudden the entire history disappears, that is a huge red flag, and that's not good. That is not safe. So I always think survivors survive because they know best what to do with themselves and their kids and their own lives, right? So let them decide, don't blanket and say, oh, clear your email history, because that could be a very dangerous thing to do. Because if that history disappears, it looks suspicious. So the answer to that is use an alternate email location, the library. If somebody works in an office, they can use their office computer, or a friend, right? Just don't, or create a really confusing, like a confusing string of things online, like looking at, I wouldn't look at travel sites, but shopping, just create a lot of history so there's not just the same two things showing up on history all the time. I hope that makes sense. I want to get some of these questions on chat. Somebody says they use email a lot. It's their main form of communication for many clients. And we have someone saying they typically aren't using email because they want more of an immediate response. Another comment is they only communicate with clients via email when the client indicates it's the best form of communication, which is great, right? Because you are talking with them. You want to know what's the best way to connect with you. Is it phone? Is it text? Is it email? Of course, if these are the things that you have access to as an agency. Somebody says, yes, email is becoming more popular and easier to access for their clients. Another person said they're communicating mostly via text. The population they serve is more comfortable with text and they don't know how to use email. Others use the library computer to email. And then we have a comment here that someone just had a client who went through that exact thing. The perpetrator had used her email to send fake emails to his ex. In return, his ex-wife got a restraining order against her. Okay, yeah, that's a nasty situation. Would using an incognito window that does not track cookies be a safety measure? Yes, I mean you could, but I think that's a whole new level of tech savvy. Most folks I don't think know about cookies and who collects cookies and how to clear cookies, right? So there is some skill to knowing how and what to clear. In a perfect world, they're clearing everything. But again, like I mentioned, that might not be the safest thing to do. Because if you wipe out a history, that looks very suspicious. But only if you're being tracked, right? There's nothing I like better than a lazy stalker. Those are the best. When they have devoted their life to stalking a person, this is the kind of stuff they're looking for, though. I also like stupid stalkers because they can't figure this out, right? They can barely get through life, let alone be high-tech about anything. So if you've got a smart one that's got a lot of time on their hands and they're sharp, those are the hard ones. And we live here and it's a really techie part of the country and there are a lot of techie people out there. So I think the likelihood of somebody being relatively tech savvy is pretty high coming from Washington State. So you got to be careful. But again, if you've got a lazy, dumb one, that's awesome. Much easier to safety plan around that. Incognito, yeah, okay, great. Okay, so how do you think we covered this enough? Pipe in on the chat if you have anything else, because we're moving into social media now. So just want to make sure we covered, email, text, phones, that kind of thing. Okay, so think about that. Either make notes or pipe in. So here we are, right? Social media. Almost all agencies have several social media platforms, right? And when I say the word platform, what I'm talking about is, you're reaching out through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, things like that. Some are using many other things, right? YouTube channel. And I just think these multiple platforms, unless they are monitored or specifically fall under one or two people's wheelhouse, and not by wheelhouse I mean their little hobby, but it is part of their job, it can really get away from you. And here at the coalition, I think you'll see, I think a lot of you are on the website, the coalition's website, and also the coalition's Facebook page, which is managed very, very well. You can use great example of how that's done. If you have Facebook pages, can you just chime in on your chat here? Who's managing your Facebook page? I'm just curious. If you have a Facebook page, who takes care of that? Your agency, not your personal. We're going to talk about your personal Facebook in a minute, but right now, your agency Facebook page, who's doing that? So social media, social media. So again, I've already, does your agency have a policy that prohibits posting private and sensitive information about survivors? And my response to that is, God, I hope so, right? Obviously. Some things are just obvious. But it's important to know, 'cause sometimes people do things well-intended, but they're a disaster. So that's why I call these things out as well. Do advocates know how to respond safely when survivors choose to communicate through your agency's social media platforms? And this is hugely important. I was working here at the coalition doing some Facebook stuff for the agency here, and several women did reach out via Facebook message, or even just posting in the comments. And so having a really respectful yet vague response, of course there was no level of detail. And again, I just want to say, I think women are the best the best at assessing their safety. And I don't want to diminish that. Like if they're posting in front of everybody on social media about their situation and have a very specific question, I understand that they must feel safe, but that doesn't mean you have to respond in kind. You can have a policy in place at your agency about how you respond to anything like that on your Facebook page. And just having a really clear guideline about how to respond to that, right? And also, um, you know, you have to decide, like on Facebook in particular, are you going to, let anybody post on your Facebook page? I mean, here at the coalition, we did not edit comments, and there were some questionable comments that went up on the page, but the goal was not to edit, but to engage. And, but everybody that works for the coalition does not have access as an administrator to Facebook here to respond to those questions. So the team that does is, on the same page about how to respond and what to respond to. And I want to get to some of these responses to my question about if you have a Facebook page, who is monitoring that. And um, we've got the executive director, the front desk person, supervisors and senior advocate manage our Facebook page. The community education department monitors the Facebook page. Admin staff only, not direct service staff. And one person said, we only post articles, informational posts, and events. When a survivor messages us on social media, we try to find alternate ways to communicate via other methods. So that's great. That's great. And what about when someone wants to friend or follow you on social media? Well, the whole point is you're trying to get people to come to your page. So it's kind of, come one, come all. Twitter, how are you responding to Twitter? How are you responding to Instagram if you have an Instagram account? Instagram is basically pictures. So it's, what are you posting? What do mostly people are liking, in quotes, liking your picture. And I think the best way to kind of dip your toes in this as an agency is to start with a personal account. And I think if you're comfortable doing it, you can imagine what it would be like to kind of transfer that over to the agency. And again, having talks with your directors and your supervisors and your, people that are in charge, um, you want to make sure they're not social media averse, right? Like any agency that is looking to move forward and kind of stay up with things, you pretty much have to have involvement in social media, you know? I'm not saying everybody needs to have a YouTube channel, but I mean, having a Facebook page and an Instagram account, a blog, a lot of agencies have blogs, a lot of agencies have Twitter accounts, um, and we all know, Twitter can go sideways, right? We are witnessing Twitter going sideways in the past month or so. But there are also ways to use it for very, very good. And I think one of the best examples I can give around a great social media campaign is the Refuse to Abuse 5K that goes on here at the coalition. You will see a ton of social media around that and pushing that event and follow up and just getting people excited about it. We have our own Facebook. We have the coalition Facebook page along with the 5K Facebook page specifically for that. So if you're looking for an example around you know, what I think is a gold standard around how to use social media, check that one out. Any questions about this? Let's see, we talk about oh, we did talk about this. How do we safely communicate with clients when they reach out to us via our social media platforms? Again, I believe we covered this, but you assess with them individually. I know that we would get a lot of questions, via Facebook message, and if that's a safe way to do it, of course, do it that way. But again, you want to make sure you're having direct contact with that person. Um, and someone says, I don't have staff or clients on my Facebook account. Yes, and I did want to move into your personal Facebook account because most of us have them. If you don't have them, if you don't have one, okay, but I think you're in the minority. I mean, pretty much everybody I know has a Facebook account. Um, and each agency, I think, I think they should have one, but they definitely need to consider having a policy within staff about who to friend. And when I say friend, I'm air quoting around friend, but you know what I mean by friend, right? Some agencies do not allow staff to friend each other unless they're on a peer level. Like you cannot, if anybody is in your management chain, you can't friend your supervisor or your supervisor's supervisor. I hope that makes sense. You can only friend across the peer level. Anybody at a different level up or a different level down, um, you cannot be friends with. That a lot of agencies do it that way. Other agencies, they don't have that restriction at all. You can friend anybody and everybody you want within your agency. So it's for you to figure out what works best, what is the subculture of your agency, and keep in mind, you're going to see stuff like somebody partying hard on a Sunday night with pictures of them out having the time of their lives, and then all of a sudden you know that they called in sick on Monday morning, and you kind of know what they were doing Sunday night. What do you do with that information, right? So you have to be really, really careful about what you see on Facebook or also what you post on Facebook, right? I think Facebook privacy around who your friends are and who your family are can get really tricky. I read something recently that the vast majority of divorces going through the system right now, Facebook is mentioned in the divorce filing somewhere in the paperwork. Facebook has a profound effect on people, what they're seeing, what they're reading. Um, and so keep in mind, how much do you want out there for your coworkers who you may just love and adore your coworkers today, but, fast forward a year, 5 years from now, how's that going to look? Hopefully everything's fine, but things happen, life happens, right? You got to be really, really careful. And another thing that I highly advise you all do if you have because you have a Facebook page is you go in and you hide your friends. And by that I mean you can go into your settings and you can make it so that when somebody clicks on your Facebook page, your friend list does not appear. Because what happens there is if your 200 friends appear, they can click on those friends. And if that friend has a Facebook that is not locked down, they're going to see everything that friend posts. And it could be pictures of you. It could be pictures of your kids. It could be pictures of things you don't want other people to see. Like you may have your Facebook locked down or what you think is locked down, but until you lock down that friends list, anybody can see anything on your friends. And I will admit this to you, there is nothing I like better than an unlocked Facebook page. Oh my God, I love it. I love it. I can click, click, click to my heart's content, see stuff that I probably shouldn't see. But I'm like, hey, if you don't have it locked down, that's on you. So my tip to you is lock down your Facebook page. And I think a lot of people don't know how to do that. So when you get home tonight, get into your privacy settings and lock it down. Because I'm guessing you all work for DV programs because you're on this webinar, right? So you do want a private Facebook page. You want to be able to accept friend requests, but you don't want the world, and I literally mean the world, to have access to your Facebook pictures and your posts. Does this make sense? I know I'm going on about Facebook here. Check in with me about Facebook. Any questions? Your personal Facebook. I want you all to be as safe as possible. And if you're safe as possible, I think you pass that on to the clients. So check in with me. Okay. Someone says they're not on Facebook. She says, what about changing your name? Yes, some people have false Facebook names, right? I mean, I know people that have Facebook or they do set things up like when they're getting married. They do some kind of, I've seen all sorts of goofy things. So you can call yourself whatever you want to call on Facebook, but just make sure your actual friends and actual family who you do want to, interact with know who that person is because you will not be searchable, right? Your best friend from elementary school will not know who you are if you change your name. So yeah, no, it's a great idea. And I also think that's a fantastic idea for the women that we serve. But again, they have to make sure that they're letting people know who they want to know what their new name is on Facebook. So, any other Facebook questions? Yeah, I guess again, get in those privacy settings. Just play around. Just see what you can hide. And friends list is that number one thing I think you should look at because once you get into that, you can find so much information. Okay, we got on Facebook. I'm going to move on. Exactly. So again, you can friend your agency's Facebook, but then again, you can click through on that too. So someone said LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn is another platform on social media that a lot of people use professionally. If you are working with a stalking victim, like a serious, like you know, serious stalking victim, being on LinkedIn is not a wise thing because it is going to track them to exactly where they work. So there's working with stalking victims who are dealing with stalking, and it is very, very serious. And then there's another level of working with stalking victims who are being literally tracked and threatened, and their life is in danger, and they have to go under. And being on LinkedIn is not wise. Being on Facebook is not wise. You know, anything that can track you to where you live is a very dangerous thing. For you, I'm taking this question to be for you. I mean, professionally, a lot of people are on LinkedIn, and it makes perfect sense. It's a networking platform for professionals, and I just know a lot of people that use it. So yeah, I think LinkedIn is fine, but keep in mind you're putting a lot of information out there. Um, Another one that's caused a little bit of a problem is classmates.com. And what I don't think people realize is when you click on somebody's name, it lets them know that you're clicking on their name, like, oh, so-and-so is looking for you or whatever. So classmates.com gives out a ton of information that is typically not anticipated, and I've heard it can be kind of embarrassing. So just heads up on classmates.com. Okay, video chats. I know some agencies are doing video chats with clients, and again, having privacy policies in place for this, it is very, very important, and not saving contact or any information about that video chats. And um, and if you are video chatting with clients, talk to them about computer monitoring and literally step by step go through with them how they can erase the chat and how you can make sure that those video chat conversations are not recorded. Now, what I'd like to put out there is if you are an agency that's using video chat, can you type into the chat box on how that's working for you? This is not something I have experience with. We did not do video chats where I worked. Um,
We didn't have the equipment.
yeah, yeah. So if video chat is something you're doing, I'm just really curious. I think that's very next level kind of stuff. Video chats, no one? Okay. All right, I'm going to move on. This is getting into more of the agency infrastructure. So um, I liked this graphic because the firewall, right? That's literally what this is all about is your agency's data, the precious, precious private data, and what happens to that data, and being sure you are not falling into this false sense of security about that data not being vulnerable. Um, Uh, no, I think that's all I have. Deidre's commenting that she really likes that too. I just think agency infrastructure is where it all begins, right? Unless you have buy-in from management on up and IT, it you're working against the wind here, and it's really, really hard. And I think if you are in a larger agency that actually has an IT department, and again, hit me up in video chat, do you have a separate IT department or is it your admin person? I mean, I've worked in both types of places where there was a huge admin, I'm sorry, huge IT department, right? But just because you have an IT department does not mean um, DV and sexual assault survivors information is as safe as it should be, right? It's very different. It's there's agency IT and agency privacy, but DV and SA confidentiality and privilege information is different. And so having meetings with them and talking with them specifically about what you need and expect is really, really important. Yeah. Right, and I think clients need to know too that you are having these conversations. Imagine if you were accessing services and you saw somebody typing into a computer. You know, where's that information going? Why are you taking this information down? That type of thing. Okay, so again, most agencies, if you have a computer, is running anti-spyware, antivirus software, and then it runs frequently. And hopefully computers are password protected, and hopefully you know, the passwords get changed often, and yeah. And a lot of agencies I know have computers set up for clients to use to do job searches, or you know, whatever, they just need to get online, or you know, and is that set up to optimize safety and privacy? And I know, you know, this is iffy. A lot of folks like to do this, a lot of folks don't want to bother, and yes, it can be an issue. I know that we had a couple of issues where, you know, we did have a computer set up for walk-ins and they were walking in and using it for porn, you know, and so then, okay, you know, learn and press forward, you know, you block out porn sites, right? But sometimes when you do that, it blocks out things you want people to have access to. And the example I'll use here is breast exams and breast cancer, like somebody trying to get information about that, all that was blocked out. So, you know, it was hard. It was hard to find a balance. And then there was an issue, like to me, it was like a value statement about, oh, we don't want them coming in here sitting on Facebook and work. But then it was like, well, why not, right? If they don't have a computer and this is the only place they can access Facebook, why not? So these are harder, unintended conversations that if you decide to set up a public space computer, you know, like I said, unintended, these things that can happen that you don't really think about until you're faced with them, with folks using that computer. And so just kind of setting up, you know, what's important to you, what you'll allow, what you won't allow. But having computer access for clients is huge. It is their gateway, especially if they have a computer at home that is not a safe computer for them to use. And tablets, exact same questions for tablets. Now, I know some agencies are moving towards having tablets, which I think, oh, my response to that is that seems so fancy to me, having a tablet. But when we talk about mobile advocacy, it's so much easier for an advocate to have a tablet than lug around a laptop, right? And tablets are not as expensive as laptops, but same technology, same safety measures, same policies and procedures. Um, but just something to consider. And again, this comes under the auspices again of infrastructure. And if you don't have buy-in, if you don't have a budget line item for IT or equipment or upkeep, I just know this is really, really hard, which gets me to the next. This question came and it just kind of broke my heart. Our technology doesn't work. Internet goes down. Printers and fax doesn't work. Computers are old. What should we do? I mean, you guys, I don't know. This made me so sad, but I also know this is how a lot of agencies are, right? We're nonprofit agencies. We're not doing this work because we're getting rich. We're just not. Agencies are not flush, typically. And we're doing the best we can with what we've got. And sometimes it is really old stuff, right, that's just slogging along. And it makes me sad, especially because technology changes and advances constantly, right? And so if agencies doing the critical work that we do cannot keep up, it's a problem. And I think a lot of you are experiencing this problem. And again, I'm sorry. I would really advocate for you to advocate with your management chain to up your game, right? If your tech doesn't work, it just slows you down. And you need to have computers that work. And obviously you need printers that work. I mean, these things are just basics. So really, really working hard to advocate to get budget line item in there around advancing and maintaining all your technology does everybody good. I could imagine the executive directors at these agencies are suffering with the same problems, right? Like they're not happy with it. I don't know. Okay, let's see. Oh, so one of the suggestions here is basically to keep putting work orders into IT and letting your supervisors and managers know. Yes, I mean, yeah, you can just keep submitting work orders, but if historically it doesn't matter and you're submitting work orders and IT is not responding, you know, right, like how are you going to, you know, what's it going to take to change that? And again, it's infrastructure. It comes from the top down on this one. Like you can certainly advocate up for all these things and make really valid reasons why you need stuff to be current and working all the time. Um, and again, it's a safety issue, right? If you are doing mobile advocacy and you are out in the field and your stuff isn't working, I think that's a dangerous situation. And you wouldn't want to be in it and you wouldn't want your staff to be in it. So this is just a bee in my bonnet. It really is. I just think you've got to get management to realize that this is critical and this is a priority, and then talking to the board about it and having the board buy in and really just having a huge agency turnaround. Here at the coalition, they invest a tremendous amount of money in their budget every year around technology. And it's impressive and it has to happen. And I think they set a great example for agencies across the board. I mean, I remember our director at New Beginning said no one likes to feel poor. It's a crappy feeling to feel like your stuff doesn't work, right? And if you feel poor, it just bogs you down. And as an agency providing this critical service around domestic violence and sexual assault, that should not be your starting point, right? Sorry, I know I'm on a soapbox about this. I just feel so strongly that technology really is the link to the whole next level of how stuff is going to happen around advocacy, and in particular mobile advocacy. That is the wave. Just like we've seen rapid rehousing in the housing programs, right? That is happening. It's happening. Mobile advocacy is happening. It's the way things are going. This is not so much butts in chairs all day long in your office. This is advocates on the move, out in the community, doing their thing. Um, any comments, questions? Keep them coming. So let's talk about website safety here. Oh, that was a fancy little graphic. Okay, so on your agency website, does it include information about privacy and safety for survivors who visit your site and offer them a method to quickly leave that site? So what you see on this slide here, see that green arrow up at the top that says escape? If somebody is on your site, if somebody's on the coalition's website, they can hit that brown thing that says escape, that brown box, and it immediately dumps them into the weather channel. You can see that box on the right, and you can test this yourself when you're on the coalition website. Hit that escape button, it's going to bring you to weather. And that is obviously if somebody's online on the computer looking at the coalition website and somebody walks in, the abuser walks in, you hit that escape button and it jumps to that immediately. It looks like you're just checking out the weather, the local weather, unless you're going to Brazil. But yeah, so that escape button is critical, and we have been advocating about that for, I swear, 15 years. And most websites have it. I went through a bunch of agencies and checked, and some don't, but most do, and it's a great thing to add. Work with your ID department around escape button on your DV page and your sexual assault page to immediately get you off that page. Any comments about this on chat? Yes. Somebody said, I just tried the escape page and it didn't work. Well, I'm not quite sure. It brought me to the weather. Yeah, it's supposed to bring you to the weather. Um, Yeah, so once you're on the coalition's webpage and you hit that brown escape button, um, it should, it should bump you right to the weather. Okay, all right. Maybe they changed I just checked this and it went to the weather. Um, yeah, so again, go on your agency's website or your DV, if your DV program is part of a bigger agency, go specifically to your DV programs page on the website and see what it does. And if it doesn't have anything, work with your IT department to put in an escape button. We've got some, theirs goes straight to Google, others goes again to weather. Um, could be, okay. So does this make sense, this escape button? I just think it's a really important part of your agency's web page. Okay. It's okay. We can loop back around to this stuff again. We're going to have time for Q&A at the end of this. So if you've got some questions, we can wait for that. Okay, I'm going to move forward. Huh, maybe not. Hold tight here. Oh, it jumped to the next. We need to come back over here. I cannot tell you how funny I think it is that during a tech training we have had all kinds of tech issues. There we go. I think we're back over here now. Let's see. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Hmm. It's doing that twirling circle thing and then it's shutting down. Oh my goodness. Bear with us, folks. Bear with us. Okay, now is a good time to type in some questions into chat because it looks like our slideshow just kind of went on hiatus here for a second. Hmm. Thank you for your patience, you guys. And we're down to slide up here, data management, further up, right there. There you go. Okay, thanks for your patience, you guys. Okay, so we're pressing forward to data management. Are we recording? Are we okay? Okay. Again, this is a huge part of what we do. And are you collecting, the question here is, are you collecting the minimum amount of information from survivors needed to provide them services and minimizing the risk of that information being inadvertently revealed? Again, I think agencies are creating a ton of information, personally identifying information that is not necessary, particularly on intake. I think shelter intake, program intakes are full of questions that really are not necessary. You need to know what you need to know, right? Like we need to know how many kids she has. We need to know how old those children are. We need to know, do they have special needs, especially if you're screening in for shelter. And I know there's a project, underway here around shelter screening and intake that you're going to see shortly, but, and that is specifically to address this exact problem, is how to streamline shelter intake and the amount of questions that are being asked. What physical security measures are in place to protect all electronic and paper records, and what is your agency's written policy around enforcing data retention and talking about backup data retention. So I'm going to ask you to pop in on chat here. Do you have a record destruction schedule? Right? What are you doing when you have physical records or digital records? Do you have policy in place about clearing that out? Now you do have contract requirements that you have to keep data for a certain amount of years, but past that requirement, What are you doing? I'm curious. One agency says they destroy all documentation as soon as possible or pass it back to the client and allow it to take it with them or destroy. Shelter documents are secured in the basement for minimum time frame and then we destroy annually. Another agency says yes, every 7 years, but they keep minimal information to begin with. So we're seeing a trend of folks know exactly how long they have to keep their information, and if you don't know, find out, right? It's in your contract. It's in all your contracts. And I, I, I can't remember if they're kind of aligned and that they're all pretty much the same, 7 years, but it's important that you keep your data as long as you must keep your data. But anything past that, get rid of it. You can hire companies that literally back their truck up into your parking lot and shred it, right? Because you're not going to have some poor soul standing at a shredder that only takes 5 pieces of paper at a time and then jams up every 10 minutes, right? No, you hire a company, it's not that expensive, and they shred it by the handful. And it's done, and it's a very good feeling. And the same with your online data. You should be clearing and deleting that as soon as you possibly can. And again, this goes back to the very basic thing of you're not retaining and writing down more than you absolutely need to. And I use this story all the time that when I first started doing direct service and I was an advocate, uh, uh, community advocate, I used to write so much down in case notes that it was probably scary, but it was definitely pathetic. I mean, it was almost like, dear diary, today was a good day, right? And I'd go on and on and on, just horrible, and I came to realize quickly that, this is not the way you do case notes, right? And then, when I became a supervisor and was reviewing case notes, I realized, wow, this is such an area of need for training because, I would be seeing things like, Deirdre was suicidal today, right? You don't write stuff like that down because what if that gets into the hands of, someone in court? And again, right, attorneys have an amazing ability to read upside down. So do abusers. It's a crazy skill, but people can read upside down. So if that stuff gets subpoenaed and able to be reviewed, people see stuff they shouldn't see. So record keeping, I think, is huge. And then what happens to those records post record keeping, again, another big deal. And we have a couple of, most people are saying 7 years. Locked files, shredding company, mass shred every year. Hey, can somebody tell me how much that costs you yearly? Like, what's your budget for that every year? I'm just curious if we can get a couple of numbers up here. Because I said I know it's not that expensive, but I realize I can't remember how much it was actually. So to have like the truck come into your parking lot and just shred boxes and boxes of papers or files, and the whole file goes in, including that little metal thing. You don't have to be pulling stuff apart at all. It's great. So if somebody can, oh, I'm trying to move to the next. There we go. Okay, so databases. We're going to talk. Okay, somebody here said she thinks they pay, or he thinks he paid about $140. So let's just round up and say for probably $200, your agency could have this done once a year. 200 bucks. That is not a lot to pay, right? I mean, in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so databases managed on site. So we're going to talk about managed on site and managed off site. So is the client and agency data stored on a server in your office, and to know that it has a firewall to protect it from breaches. And I realize this is starting to get in deep, and a lot of people don't like to go in this deep talking about databases and firewalls and the cloud, but we're just going to touch on it and then get right out, so don't be scared. Um, and do you have appropriate access level to ensure staff that only sees the information that's relevant to their role? Here was my paranoia about the shredder company that came in. I was worried that they were going to see look at what they were shredding. So I made it my business. I personally stood out there and supervised the shredder guys as they loaded it into the shredder. And after I watched them for a while, I really was convinced They do not give a crap about what they are shredding. They are literally trying to get it in that machine and pull on out of there. So if it does your heart good, go out there and stand there and watch them feed that stuff into the giant monster shredder, and you will see they are literally not looking for things. They're not. They're not reading it. They don't care. They pretty much don't know what you do. So have confidence. But watch it. Watch it and make sure you feel comfortable, and then let them do their thing. And again, making sure only people see what they need to see. I think one agency has a volunteer do their shredding for them, and they feel comfortable with that. They know the volunteer. But again, if you're the person tasked with shredding, you're really not standing there reading this. I mean, I have shredded plenty of documents in my day, and when you're doing it, the last thing you're doing is reading it. I don't know. If you have a different experience, let me know. So database is managed by a third party. Again, everything for your own internal database management, same questions for a third party database management. And basically, database managed by a third party, it's like the cloud, right? We're going to move right into the cloud next, but do you know what their measures are? Who has access to your files? How are they doing it? Is it commingled with files belonging to their other clients? If so, do you care? Um, are they removing all survivor data from the files stored by a third party? Again, this is up to you. They work for you. If your data is being managed by a third party, you are paying them and you get to dictate what they do. So make sure your values and your needs are lining up with exactly how they provide the service that you are paying for. I hope that makes sense. And this is pretty much all I'm saying about databases. So if you've got some questions, write them down and we can loop back to this. Now we're moving into the infamous cloud. And a lot of people get a little bit scared about the cloud, but essentially, I'm going to give it to you in one sentence. The cloud is your information stored on someone else's computer. That's all it is. It's your information stored on someone else's computer, right? And there are three things you need to be concerned about. Is it safe? Is it reliable? And is it private? Safe, reliable, and private, right? Pretty simple threshold there. And those of you that, my experience is with Apple and iPhone, so I'm going to speak from that experience. If you have an iPhone, you have experience with this, right? Your photos go up to the cloud. They go up to iPhoto. You have a iPhoto stream, your photo stream, right? And you can share that stream with certain people. Your documents also go up to the cloud. So I think if you're worried about agency stuff, try to bring it down to, okay, what's happening to my stuff? What's happening to the 100 pictures I take of my dog? Where do those pictures land, right? They land on someone else's computer because they're in the cloud and everybody kind of looks wistfully up to the sky, right? So questions about the cloud, I know this is an area that's getting a little bit out there. So either save these questions about the cloud or hit me up in the chat box now. So here are a couple bullet points about that. Do you have an agreement with the cloud computing company that allows you to retain ownership of your own data that prohibits them from using, sharing, or selling it? Again, this is like iCloud, right? How do you feel about using your iCloud? Does the service own their own servers or do they lease theirs through another company? And what are the policies of the third party company? Same questions, exact same questions. This one I think is important for management to know for sure, is how do they respond to legal requests? Do they contact you first? Are you immediately informed of any requests? What about if there's a data breach, right? You need to know what their policies are to, before you make any decisions about where you're going to give your business. And do you know where the servers are located and what jurisdictions they fall under? And can you permanently delete files from their server? And typically, like on iCloud, yes, you can. And one of the questions came through, is there a limit? Is there a way to limit what goes into the cloud? Yes. I mean, for those of you that have iPhones, I think other phones the same. You can shut it down. You cannot have it go there. I have a couple different devices. I happen to be an Apple fangirl, so I've got Apple devices, but on my laptop, my MacBook, everything goes to the cloud on there. But on my iPad, I don't have all my pictures go to the cloud. It's just too much. Like I don't want to take up a lot of space on my iPad or my iPhone, right? But I have a lot of space on my laptop, so it goes there. So you can control device by device what gets stored and where it gets stored. So the answer to that is yes. And in terms of like the great big pictures, when you're got terabytes of information like from your agency, you have just as much control. And these are all questions. If you have an IT department, they're going to know about this. And you can talk to them about you can bring them the printout of this slide and say, could you please answer all these questions for me? I'm curious, especially from a domestic violence standpoint, what the answers to these questions are. And looping it around to best practices again, on that NNEDV website, there's a lot more detail about this. We're going to get to that in a minute as well. Let's see. Someone says, I use Apple products but don't use the cloud. My IT training showed they can be easily subpoenaed. Do you know anything beyond my training? Probably not. It's not that it can be easily subpoenaed. Most everything's on the cloud and you can subpoena anything. In terms of looking through the lens of a DV program, you want as little as possible out there. So if you don't need client data in the cloud, you don't have to have it out there. But again, I would really recommend that you spend some time on the best practices worksheet on the National Network to End Domestic Violence website, because each of those topics expand out to about 5, 6 other topics, and you can really thoroughly go through and see what will work for you. I hope I'm answering your question, Sharon. Yeah, I know you can control it. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Um, yeah, yeah. Or you can go to the Apple, yeah, that's the other thing. You can go to the Apple Store, the Genius Bar, or sometimes, as I like to call it, the Not So Bright Bar. Okay. All right, Wi-Fi security. Is your agency wireless connection password protected? My goodness, it should be. Are you a WEP or WPA encryption on your wireless connection? WEP is a thing of the past. Everything has moved to WPA. It replaced WEP. So here's what I know. If you're on WEP, get off WEP. It's not secure. Get on WPA. That is the extent of what I know about that. Is WPA is the only way to go. So you can talk to your IT guys about that. Do you limit who can access your network? Staff, guests, survivors. And this is just like when you go to um, a hotel, for example, or a restaurant. Sometimes they say free Wi-Fi available for all customers, right? And you can go in there and go into your settings and sign into their Wi-Fi, right? Starbucks, perfect example, Starbucks. Keep in mind you are not on a secure Wi-Fi network. There have been a lot of crazy things that have happened. I'm not saying don't use it. It's just a nice thing to offer. But within DV and sexual assault programs, those networks are typically locked down. Typically, even staff cannot come in with their personal devices and log in to that network, because you may have a virus on your device, you may have a backdoor Trojan type thing going on. I know where I have worked, it was only agency devices that were allowed on the agency network. So you may have a network that's not as secure, but typically the DV programs, they should be. And do you have guidelines on accessing insecure wireless networks? Again, Starbucks has an insecure wireless network. Many, many people use it. I would just say personally, I would never go do my mobile banking from a Starbucks. That's just way too uh, risky to me, right? So same thing. When you're out in the community and your advocate they need a latte, they pull over into Starbucks, I would not start doing agency work, DV work on a Starbucks network. It just doesn't seem secure to me. And does your staff need to use a secure link such as a VPN to upload or download file from your agency servers? When I was working, I did have a secure VPN. It's just a little device you plug into your device and you are directly connected to your agency's network. You're not using uh, um, a, a public network. So this is kind of another one of the things you can talk to your IT people about, or your boss, is if you are doing mobile advocacy, providing that person with a VPN access via a little device, via a little, it's a little tiny thing you plug in. It's very easy and it's not very expensive again. Um, okay, no questions at this point. Does that make sense about Wi-Fi? You guys feeling pretty good about Wi-Fi? Yeah? Okay, I'm gonna press on. Cameras, so a couple different types of cameras I wanted to talk about here. First, surveillance cameras. Surveillance cameras at shelters are commonplace, as are recording things at an event. And do you inform people that they are being recorded? If you have attended a coalition conference in September, you know that there's always a big public announcement that we are taking pictures and they're going to be used for a slideshow later in the week. And we ask folks to, opt out of those pictures. If you aren't safe or don't want to be in a picture, let us know and we will not take your picture, let alone put it in the slideshow. And this agencies also like to take a lot of pictures of their clients and their adorable children for use in their publications, like their annual reports and their websites. And there are releases that need to be signed for that, right? Some people, particularly in TV programs, don't want their images or their kids' images out there publicly, and it makes perfect sense. So um, I'm I'm going to assume you allow people to opt out of being recorded, either with video or with cameras. And do you have a policy about deleting images or video? This is something I don't think a lot of people think about, right? You may have an annual gala, an annual dinner, and there you could have, thousands of pictures from that event. What are you keeping them for is the question. So again, if it's a work-related event stored on your agency's computer, I think it's worth knowing, you can delete all those. And in particular, if you've got images of survivors and their kids, definitely what are you keeping those for is a question. This is all I have around cameras and security. So if you've got questions about this, please make note and we'll loop back around and talk about it. And I've got a comment here that says, we only share images with a release of information that clearly states what, when, where, etc. So that's a great example. Great example. Okay. This was another question we got in several different forms, but it was basically, what about GPS? And in different forms, what if somebody's being monitored via their phone, their car, their wheelchair, their backpack, and they're being tracked? And my first thing to say about this is trust your gut. It does not do you wrong. It always is right. It really is. Trust your gut. And this is a technology that has changed so much, advanced so much. And what I just heard lately was, find your keys, find you, right? Those little keys, that little device they're offering so you can never lose your keys, it's the size of a quarter, right? No longer does somebody need to attach a very obvious little box to the bottom of your car to track you. All they need to do, they could toss that little thing, it's the size of a quarter. Toss that in your trunk, toss that in your glove box, and you're being tracked really efficiently. Same thing, wheelchairs, your phone, we're going to talk about phone in a minute, backpacks. In Japan, because they're so technologically advanced, they make backpacks that have RFID chips in them, tracking, GPS tracking, so parents can see where their kids are all the time. This has just been the way of life there forever, that your kids' backpacks have GPS on them, and doesn't it make perfect sense? So this is one of those things that all these things that are meant for good, meant to help, if they're in the wrong hands, really awful things can happen, right? Stalkers count on and use these great devices to their advantage to stalk someone. So, it could be in your purse, it could be, and if they know where you aren't, I'm sorry, if they know where you are, they know where you aren't, right? So if they know via a tiny little device that you're at work, they know you're not at your apartment. And I know I'm kind of veering off to direct service stalking stuff, but I just want to highlight here how easy it is to monitor someone. And I want to get back around. I see the comment. I'm going to get right to it. But the phone is practice with your own phone and go into the privacy settings and shut it down, right? Someone can be tracked via their phone, especially, Find My Friend, those types of apps that are available, I know on the iPhone. Um, and a lot of parents use this for their kids if their kids have phones, right? You always know where your kid is. Because you can click on that little icon and it shows you on a map exactly where they are. So again, great resources for all the right reasons, but if someone wants to harm you or use it for all the wrong reasons, the technology is there and it's really easy to access. Okay, here's a question. Not sure if this topic will be addressed. We get a lot of calls regarding tech safety in the home. Smart TVs, homes being electronically wired to hack into residents' technologies. They want to know how to stop this. The example is husband is an electrician and has wired the home and the client is fearful that they are tracking every move. We get a lot of calls about automobiles having chips implanted in the cars. If this isn't addressed today, can you recommend a website that we, yes, okay, I see. Well, that is a loaded question. Yeah, remember we were talking about smart versus not so bright abusers. So this person is an electrician and has wired the home. So again, all these things that are supposed to be for your convenience, put in the wrong hands, it's a nightmare. And what they can do, it just depends. Yeah, I would imagine if that person is still living with this husband, it looks like they are still together, that she probably is being tracked. He's got it set up that way. So she needs, in terms of accessing services and safety planning, she needs to do it outside of the house. So knowing that she's being monitored, she can also game that system, right? I think, and I don't mean for her to be um, putting herself in harm's way or unsafe, but if you know somebody's watching, you can really kind of front load stuff about what you're looking at online, what you're doing. I've heard of stalking victims who their computer is being monitored daily, so there was not a chance she was going to erase the history on her computer, but what she did was she loaded it with all sorts of stuff. A ton of stuff for one, just to create that chaos, but also looked at a couple of different cities. And of course, these were not cities she was remotely going to go to, but it just kind of just put this person off track. And it was very smart, very smart. What I always tell folks is you're smarter than they are. You may not feel like you are, but you really are. And this person talks about getting cars having chips implanted. Yeah, it can happen. And you can also go to the police station and ask them. Of course, they're going to monitor you rolling right up on the police station, but you can call, just how you can check it out. The tricky thing is these devices are so small now, they're very hard to detect, right? But if you, like I said, trust your gut. If you think you're being monitored, you probably are. And you can check yourself as well. I would go through every nook and cranny of my car to see if I could find something. Um, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. Yes. Yes. So again, we're going to move to, this is what the NNEDV website looks like. So if you type in nnedv.org, this is what's going to come up. And you can see, I want to show you on the upper right-hand side, that safety alert right there. That is another escape button right there. It's just a different way of doing it if you're looking for another example. And this is what their website looks like. These people are the gurus around technology and safety. And you can see right there, tech safety app. On the upper, on those tabs, you'll see resources. If you click on resources on your upper right, it's going to bring you down. You can see the green arrow here, organizational technology capacity and development for agencies and programs working with survivors. That is the content of what you just saw, right? So you can see exactly what we've been talking about right there. Now, if you look up, you will see assistive technology for people who have disabilities, cell phones, confidentiality, databases and data retention, general tech safety, all this online safety. See how there's a plus sign there? When you hit that plus sign, it blossoms into about 6 other um, links that you can click on, and included in those links are the best practices as well. So this really is your go-to site for all that stuff. A lot of people know a whole lot about stalking in and around the country, in and around the state. Like for me, it just became a passion, so I love reading up about it. It's not like you have to devote your life to it, but this to me makes it really easy to just get in, see what you need to see, and get out. Um, but I really would encourage you to incorporate all this tech stuff in your safety planning. Again, one of the themes I saw around crisis line and hotlines were, what do I do if this is the only way I get to talk to someone? And that is just to make tech safety a matter of course when you're safety planning on the hotline, just as much as, stuff around housing and stuff around employment, stuff around tech safety, because pretty much everybody has a cell phone. So if you're talking about cell phone safety, you're covering a lot of ground, a lot of ground. Um, and it's not hard. It's really not. And if you just click on that cell phone tab right there and look at the drop downs, you will see exactly probably what you need to know. Yeah, and like I always say when I do these things, if you have any questions, please contact Deidre. And her contact information is on the lead slide. And if she doesn't know, she'll get in touch with me. And I'm here every Wednesday, so I'm in close touch. Um, and this is just stuff that, I think the coalition has done a fantastic job and is very committed to making sure the information gets out there. So we are at the end and we have time for Q&A. So I'd love to hear any feedback you have, because the final thing is that as soon as we end this in a couple of minutes, I think you're going to be directed to a survey, and I would love for you to give any detail you can on the survey, because it helps me in terms of content, like what was helpful, what would you like more of, what would you like less of, essentially. And I'd really appreciate it if you did that. So Q&A, let me take, I know we've talked about a lot of different things, but anything you want to loop back around and have a question about? No questions. And also just wanted to say, we want to thank DSHS because they are the ones that requested this training happen. Back about a year ago, the National DV Hotline did a wonderful webinar. It was those 2 guys out of Texas, and they got really detailed around tech safety and agency readiness stuff. And there was a great response to that our member programs here wanted more. So this is in response to that. And that really fired me up, and I really wanted to bring more of it to the group. So DSHS was very kind and said, sure, let's do another webinar this year. So that's what this is. So this was part of the coalition's work plan this year, was to bring this to you. So, I want to say thank you, but I think the agencies really benefit from keeping this conversation going. Let's see, somebody said, well, thank you. I think this is a great training and would love to have our IT person attend. Are you having it again? No, but it's going to be recorded. So your IT person can watch it in its entirety. Yeah, so it will be posted and you can ask them to watch it. Yeah, but again, I think the one I said, any portion of this at some point you can print out the slide and bring it to them and ask them, especially those questions about the cloud. I think the cloud is something that's just literally something kind of ethereal and not really everybody grasps 100%. So, getting to know more about that is always helpful. So, yeah. Yeah. And again, I think having this webinar recorded, you can share it with other people in your agency at a staff meeting or a team meeting even, if you want to just have I know you probably don't have an entire 2 hours to devote to this at a staff meeting, but you could also pick up just portions of it and do it in pieces. Yeah. I find it fascinating. I know a lot of people don't, but um, it's important stuff, and I think we all have to have some level of understanding about it because we're providing very, very private, confidential services to a very vulnerable group of people who, are reaching out for help. So, yeah. So I'm going to wrap up. Any final comments or questions before we shut it down here? Give you a minute just to say something. And also, I just sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you. I love doing this stuff. I love being able to talk about it, and it's really been my privilege to be able to do this. So thank you so much, and I hope everybody has a great day. And please take the survey. Okay, bye-bye, guys.